Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. On Star Citizen Sunday this week, we get our questions answered regarding the upcoming changes to flight and combat in 3.10 and in the future. Plus, we have a new post highlighting the ups and downs of 3.9 and what Cloud Imperium have learnt from the patch. So Star Citizen Live this week was talking to the vehicle experience team about all of the upcoming updates to the flight and combat of Alpha 3.10 and beyond. So starting with all the flight questions and answers, first one being how long can ships with VTOL thrusters expect to hover compared to those without VTOL? Now they said they don't have a current time frame as to how long VTOL thrusters will be able to sustain thrust compared to maneuvering thrusters, as it isn't coming in 3.10. It'll be determined very much by the size of the thrusters and the ships, how much power the thrusters can develop, amongst other factors. Thrusters that overheat will turn off or malfunction. And if you didn't know, eventually there will be more detail and differences between maneuvering thrusters and VTOL thrusters, with the latter allowing ships to hover for longer periods of time compared to ships that don't have VTOL and must rely on their maneuvering thrusters to hover. This will give more definition to each ship, with non-VTOL ships suffering more if they hover, meaning that fighters won't just be able to hover in any way they want, shooting at infantry. They'll have to keep on moving, otherwise their maneuvering thrusters will burn up or deteriorate. Anyway, next question is, will the new environmental wind affect thruster performance? Now they said yes, in windy environments the thrusters need to counter the wind torque. Thrusters are affected by the atmosphere as well, so the higher up you are, the thrusters will increase in efficiency. For example, if you're flying low in Lawville, your thrusters will be working at about 58%, whereas if you are on a moon with a much less dense atmosphere, they will work around 80%, and obviously everywhere is different. Will the mass of cargo on ships factor into the flight model? And yes, they will. They have a small atmospheric buffer, and depending on the planet, if you add more weight to the ship, like adding cargo, then you may struggle getting out of atmosphere. Next question, how long should the Caterpillar be able to hover in normal gravity environments? Kind of similar to the other question, but they did go on to explain how they will definitely have a limit to this and communicate that to the player, which is something that's very important, is letting us know what's going on. Now, as stated before, there is no exact number to how long it would happen, but it won't be instant. There will be warnings that tell you if the ship thrusters are starting to fail or having problems, and it will be long enough to launch and land, but just not for extended periods of time. Next question, can we get an altitude hold autopilot, so being able to fly at the same altitude consistently without needing to constantly change your flight vector? Now they say yes, this is something that they want to implement, but it's not straightforward and they will need some time working it out. Next question, how does the flight in space feel? Are ships more or less responsive below cruise speed? Now they said it changes the time it takes for the ships to align to its flight vector, making ships feel heavier, in particular big ships. This is, they say, the first implementation, and they will tune this as they go. I have personally noticed that if you maintain a constant thrust in 3.10 in space, then you will align to your vector much quicker than if you are not thrusting. So using your thrusters to realign you if you are within the sort of space combat maneuvering speeds. Anything higher and you'll drift a little bit more. Next question, can we get match target speed back? Now there's a lot of overheads that came with this due to how it worked. It is not an immediate priority, but it will hopefully return. I hope it does because it is very useful for formation flying and escorting, so in my opinion, it's needed. Next question, can ships with wings glide in atmosphere? Now they say yes, but it is only very basic. Ships with flat surfaces glide a lot better due to there being lift, but wings don't act like they should right now. Going forwards, they do intend to bring in controllable surfaces like ailerons and flaps. Now this is great news. I love how these are spaceships, but with realistic aerodynamics. It is so much fun flying in atmosphere in 310, so when they add flaps and all that sort of stuff, it'll feel much better, and the types of maneuvers we can pull off will be so much fun, making it like that World War II dogfighting in atmosphere, which I'm looking forward to. The next question is regarding to ship speeds and atmosphere. How have they changed? Now, all of the ship speeds and atmospheres have been reduced and are more realistic. This is based on thrusters and atmosphere, of course, so the ships all feel quite different. Do keep an eye on my upcoming 3.10 flight test series, in which I test every ship in atmosphere around Microtech, flying under bridges around New Babbage and through buildings. Just to try and give an example as to how each ship handles, for example, the Gladius is much slower than it used to be, and there is a lot more consistency to the speeds across the range of ships. Whether they're at the right speeds in atmosphere, I don't know, but it definitely feels more appropriate. Next question, will we see acceleration increases? Now, they will be continuing to tune the ship combat abilities, and this may result in an increase in acceleration, but they are unsure at this time. Basically, they want to get the combat feeling right and the flight feeling right, and if that means increasing acceleration, then so be it. Are there any changes to G-forces? Now, the G-force model is the same, but they do plan to change the effects a little later on. With 310, you do hit the limits in different ways more than before, like deeper turns, banking, stalls. So you'll likely see it happen more often, leading to you needing to control the ship and your maneuvers a little better so you don't blank out. How does gravity affect the flight? Now, it affects the amount of thrust needed to remain level, and I don't personally think we will see much in way of gravity effects until we have the adjustments to the thruster behaviours. At that point, I think when the thrusters are behaving as they're supposed to, we will be able to feel gravity a bit more. Next question is, will opening cargo doors affect flight performance? Now, they say that not in 3.10, but doors and landing gear can be built into the effects. Thanks to this drag system, the effects will come in a future patch. Now, I will say that I have noticed when flying the Vanguard with its landing gear down, the drag is very apparent, and then as soon as you raise it up, it begins to fly very smoothly. Whether that's just a one-off case with that ship, I don't know. I'll have to test it a bit more, but I did notice it in 3.10, so I think there's quite a bit more effects with landing gear specifically. Next question, are there any changes to the Cutlass? Now, specifically in 3.10, it has some armour. Every ship in 3.10 has armour re-added to them, which are manufacturer-derived baselines. So Drake has better armour absorption values at the expense of shield performance. They are improving Drake's usabilities, so the Buccaneer and the Caterpillar got some weaponry buffs. The Buccaneer's weapons and missiles are not on the wings, so you don't lose them easily, and the same goes for the coolers and fuel tanks, and the Caterpillar's command module now has upgraded weapons. Also, the Dragonfly and the Nox have increased speeds, and they have raised the ride height, probably to counter those rocks. Now, I'm very happy to hear that all of the ships are having refined armor values. That should make combat a little more interesting, specifically based on what ship or manufacturer that you're flying. So that's interesting to see what the differences are there. So final question for flight, does temperature affect flight, like overheating or air resistance? Now, they said that in 3.10, no, but in the future, yes. For example, if you leave your ship on a cold planet, it will require a little bit more time for the boot up. Or if you're flying over a lava planet, this will cause ships to overheat quicker, amongst other behaviours, which I do love the sound of that. Now, the next few questions are all about combat in 3.10 and beyond, and what changes there are. First question being, can you explain more about fixed weapons? So all the weapons, they say, have some level of conversions. For example, if you're firing at a target that is close to you, your bullets will eventually cross over. Now, they are using this already functioning weapon conversions to help fixed weapons. They are saying that it isn't an auto-aim, but more of an assist that they allow based on the conversions properties that all the weapons have anyway. They said they have done plenty of gameplay tests and found that fixed weapons have definitely improved and are now viable again, but not quite on par with auto gimbals, which they said is a little overpowered and will need a little debuff apparently, so expect that to be changed a little bit. Now, personally, I am a little unsure about this, so do let me know in the comments whether you like the idea of fixed weapon auto conversions sort of design. It does sound a little auto-aim to me, but I am not fully following what the explanation means. Sounds like they're saying that the weapons already converge to the target, so they're just allowing it to adjust that little bit more, but I just don't know. I'm happy to try it out and give it a go and see if it is what it should be, but I'm not completely convinced yet, so as I say, let me know what your thoughts are. Next question, have you considered having other ships designating targets for ships in a fleet? Now, they say that the current pinning system only shares the targets with members inside the ship, so if you're a pilot of a hammerhead and you share the information, it'll only go to members inside, maybe a turret gunner, for example. They do plan to have the ability for all ships to share information with whomever they choose, but that requires certain communication hierarchies that will come later on. Eventually, they will have a commander role on a ship which is going to be able to do this very thing, which is exciting stuff. Next question, are there any updates to make EMP more straightforward? Now, they would like to move the EMP role into the missile operator mode, which is coming in 3.11. EMPs are off by default, so you have to manually turn them on if you want to use them, which they agree is pretty confusing. In the future, they want to simplify it so it lets you know how to turn it on quickly and decide whether it's a good time to use it based on your power and systems. Next question, are there plans to expand on sub-targeting? So they said that they do plan to expand it out to pretty much all items of a vehicle. They're doing it in phases to ensure that the behaviours are realistic, but next up is targeting turrets, then manoeuvring thrusters, and then weapons, which will come over the course of the next few patches. They also want targeting internal components as well, but obviously we will need physical components inside of ships first. Next question, any changes to in-atmosphere missiles or torpedo gameplay in 3.10? And no, unfortunately not for 3.10, but later down the line they are going to improve them. As I say, the missile operator mode is the next focus for the next quarter. That is coming in 3.11, so they should be affected then. Final question, what are the near or long-term changes to the gunnery roles? Now, gunnery, they say, is a process of aiming and firing weapons, so be that fixed, manual, or gimbal assist. Combat is changing massively at the moment, and future patches will change how players employ weapons, though deciding the best time to use them or not. During combat, they want players to commit to the decisions they make of when to attack or when to defend. Capacitor gameplay is something they have spoken about in the past, which is going to affect combat greatly. Now, this will apply to weapons first and then flight later, so if you're consistently firing your weapons, your energy weapons, you will suffer various issues. For example, energy weapons will eventually lose charge and need recharging, so deciding the best time to employ whatever weapons you have tactically will create more meaningful and thoughtful gameplay. Capacitor gameplay will also affect thrusters as well, and there is a lot more to this which I will talk about in a future video once I can remember everything they spoke about in regards to capacitor gameplay. If anyone has a link to a previous video or update that spoke further about it, I would appreciate that being dropped in the comments. I really can't remember where it was first heard about. Anyway, a final note on combat changes. 3.10 focus is for flight. 3.11's focus is missiles, and then it's going to be capacitor focus later on. They did say that all of these changes may not make sense with each patch, but once it's all in and implemented, it'll make sense. They have actually got a side project going on called Iterative Combat Testing. This is a specific group that iterate the combat to create the experience that they are wanting and will come into the game over the next few patches. Very excited and happy to hear that they are really focused on flight and combat and just getting that to be as good as it can be. It has been a long time coming to get it to a point where people can really appreciate it and learn and test it out. So hopefully this year they achieve that. It is vital, not just for the PU, but for Squadron, of course. So the final few questions are about the HUD. Will there be any changes to ship HUD or GUI with flight changes? Now they say yes, but it's more converting the current HUD to the new building blocks. So only slight differences like in arrangement or behaviors. EMP has got a lot more information as well, but it's not radically new. They will be bringing in new manufacturer styling for each MFD later on, like this RSI branding you can see here. They have brought back the missile warning and self-destruct messages, which is good, very useful, and I am very much looking forward to the manufacturer visual updates. This, I expect, would make ships feel more unique and uniform throughout each brand, which will be great to see. Next question, can we have cockpit or HUD indicators for wind speed and other environmental effects? They said this is something they have thought about, but currently are not working on. Wind direction would be very useful, of course. How does PIP calculation UI relate to mixed loadouts? Now they say you have a single PIP for each convergence group, be that fixed weapons or gimbal weapons. They will look visually different as well, so you can tell them apart. But if you then lock your gimbals, it'll pop it into one PIP and converge both. Next question, will we get target ship direction and movement indicators? Now in 3.10, they have a directional arrow for the current direction and trail to indicate where your target has been and is going. We should eventually be able to figure out patterns of players and counter that based on the information, which will be interesting. So for example, if you see a player constantly zigzagging every time he does an attack run, then you will learn that and be able to counter it based on that information. Next question, any news on an altimeter? Now it is still in the plans, but it's not in 3.10. They know it's definitely needed. For terrain, they will be improving the radar display and are looking into ways to put that information to the player, so what the terrain is in front of you, which will be very useful when we're flying through storms and clouds. They're considering maybe different helmet vision modes for flight as well, but it's more likely just going to be a radar indicator to start with. And the final question for the HUD is, are there any updates to the HUD visual improvements? Now in 3.10, the central flight HUD will dynamically adjust its brightness based on what you're looking at or what's behind it. If it's a bright white mountain, it'll get a bit darker. If it's darkness, it'll go lighter. Not every HUD element, only the flight HUD for the moment. So things like reticles, mission markers, ATC gates, and V-joys are not yet converted. So final two questions. Parachutes, any news? Now, they're not likely going to be parachutes, more like jump-assisted fall breakers, not full-on jump jets or jetpacks, but something similar. And then final question, will NPC ships reap any of the benefits of these improvements? Now, they do take advantage of all these improvements, but that is mostly down to AI behaviors. There are a couple of bug fixes which stop the AI from rotating super quick. They are now limited to what the ships are actually capable of doing, and also AI don't use fixed assist. Anyway, that was Star Citizen Live. Very interesting to see how the flight and combat is evolving, and I am very much looking forward to the future as it develops. Do let me know what you think. Let's move on. So also this week, there was a lore post which talks about the 6th Platoon, who have been defending the UEE for centuries. The PU and Squadron 42 monthly report was released, the latter of which I have covered already in a separate video, which is linked below in the description, with the PU monthly report coming early next week. Finally, there was a new post called Post-Mortem, which brings a high-level look into Invictus Week and Alpha 3.9, what went well, what didn't, and what CIG have learned for next time. Very interesting to read, and I highly suggest checking it out. All the links are in the description below. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.